guess where I am today? That's right, I'm in the garage. The hangar, as it's also known. And the reason it's known as the hangar... Whoops. The reason it's known as the hangar is because there's a goodly amount of Cold War jets on the shelves. I said to Bruce I would just briefly do a video of those. You see they're all Cold War jets, 1/72 scale, die cast. As you can see, there's a sign there saying Royal Enfield parking, and that's the reason we're here. We're going to just fire up the Meteor, just check that the battery's still in. Or at least that's the thought. Right. Well, right. Meteor's still got power in it. Mind you, I think I'm going to have to dig out the Optimate. Right, let's sit down again. Anyway, yeah. Well, we wanted to start that one up because she's not been started very recently. And fumes. That's not a good idea, is it? Anyway, yeah, she fired, which I was pretty sure she would. But I do need to find the Optimate charger and plug it in, because she's had a bit of an extended time not being run, so yeah, the battery's getting a little low there. Mind you, that's to be expected, I suppose. Well, she hasn't had a good run out for a little while. Poor old Hurricane. But she is there, of course. The other thing I need to check in a little while, my friend Ray was over last week and he did a little bit of fettling for me because it was too cold for me to get out here. And he readjusted the gear shift, because as you can see I wear these thick old boots, and with the standard factory setting of the gear shift I was just finding it a little bit tricky to do the up change, or going up the gears, so we'll just reset it by a couple of splines just to see if it's a bit easier. And what Ray did was rather clever, because although I wasn't well enough to come out in the garage last week, he took my left boot out to size it against that, so hopefully now the gear shift is properly sorted. Right, now the other thing I need to do, of course, is to start Mustang Sally. Now you heard what the other one was like. And there you go, there's a bit of there we go, let's get her started. She works. So there's a quick fire up, make sure we just run the oil around and make sure they get a bit of air through and a bit of exhaust out, and make sure they run nicely. Of course I've got more or less a full tank on Mustang Sally, and hopefully in not too distant, I'll be able to get out. The weather's actually pretty good today. Well, you know, the weather's pretty good today, which is good. So, as I say, hopefully it won't be too long before we can get a nice ride out and I can do a proper review video. It's about 12 centigrade at the moment, which generally means I can start breathing again properly. Anything from 11 centigrade to 20 centigrade, I can usually breathe a bit better. That's the only problem for me. Well, I say the only problem, I've got a few problems, but the main problem for me is having air the right temperature so I can breathe correctly. But, you know, it is what it is. So, there you go. But then I keep myself amused by either plotting what to do next with the bike, or bikes I should say. And as I say, this little project's been a little bit drawn out. But thus far, we've done both bikes were at a stage 2 tune this time last month. The Meteor's still stage 2 tune. Anyway, stage 2 tune is the DNA air intake and filter kit, the Hitchcock's stainless steel free flow exhaust, and to keep the engine running cooler and smoother in the lower and mid range, you have the FuelX module. Now let me just explain some of these things, because there's an awful lot of disinformation still going around about how these things work, and people's expectations are a little sometimes unrealistic. And I can give you a fair breakdown of how this works. Now, the DNA filter and intake kit, it increases the airflow to the engine through the throttle body. The more air you can get into an engine and into the mix, the more efficient the burn. Contrary to common belief, airflow equals more power. In the case of the DNA filter and intake kit, approximately 1 extra horsepower over stock. Now you might think, well, 1 extra horsepower isn't much, but when you're starting with 20 horsepower at the crank, you know, that is a lot. You're going from 20 horsepower at the crank to 21. Then you've got the FuelX. That probably is another horsepower or thereabouts, but that's all in the bottom end and the lower mid range. Does nothing at the top end. And this is something else that confuses people. It seems they don't understand how this works. Know how it works. When you're running on the Euro 5 standard setup, when you're running along for emission purposes, the engine is running lean. Now, I've been involved with motorcycles for 48 years now, and I was also a mechanic in my early days. I do actually know how this stuff works. Now, the thing is that the Euro 5 stuff works by reducing the emissions by artificially leaning the engine off at low speed and you know, urban cycle. What it means is the engine's running, well, super lean, but it also means when you're running super lean like that, it increases the heat coming from the combustion. That means that the oil is under more strain than it would be normally, hence the ridiculously short oil changes, theoretically. And this is another thing, more disinformation going around. Due to a typo in earlier manuals, the actual service intervals for the J platform engine should be 6,000 miles for oil change and whatnot, not 3,000. It's a mistake that was never corrected. Now I can tell you that various people have actually in the past pointed this mistake out, but there's so much disinformation going around. People who try to say anything sensible tend to get shouted down on the internet. Well, I think you should just go off and do your own research. You will find references on the internet to the 6,000 mile intervals, and I can tell you myself through experience, 6,000 mile service, do a full service 6,000 miles or annually, you're going to be fine. Now, some people don't do 6,000 miles in a year, I certainly don't. So a once yearly full service does the job. But also running the FuelX, what it does. Now, the lambda sensor, the sensor in the exhaust and air systems, they tell the ECU how much fuel to put in, and they run, because they're set it to run lean at lower speeds. The premise of the idea is that it just uses minimum amount of fuel to move the bike along at lower speeds. But as I say, that makes the engine run hot, which is not desirable as far as the oil is concerned, and certainly not desirable with the longevity of the engine. So, what FuelX does with this binary data, the binary data is thus: the signal from the sensors goes lean or rich. It's either an on or off, like a binary decision gate. So it goes rich, 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 lean, 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 whatever, or permutations thereof. Just imagine it as an on-off, and that's pretty much your binary system there. What FuelX does is when the thing's going rich, lean, the FuelX puts an extra lean signal into the data stream, fooling the ECU into thinking it's running leaner than it is. And of course the ECU then adds the extra fuel in every time it gets an extra lean signal from the FuelX. That's how it works. So it fools the ECU into running just a little bit more fuel, thus getting rid of the lean burning. That means the engine runs cooler, it runs more efficiently, and it's less wear on the engine. That's why you fit a FuelX. It's nothing at all to do really with extra speed or torque. You get some extra torque and horsepower from a little bit from the FuelX, but mainly from the DNA filter. The other way to add more torque and gas flow, you got the air flowing in, and you want the gas to flow out, and the combustion is taken care of by the FuelX. The exhaust system, free flow exhaust system, it gets rid of the catalytic converter, which is an unnecessary piece of ironmongery that you should just take off and throw in the back of the garage. There is no legal requirement for it post market. They have to be on there when the dealers sell the bikes as new, but once you've in possession of the bike and it's your bike, you can take the blasted thing off. Now, having said that, if you're on one of those PCB things, sort of leasing the bike sort of thing, you can't do this. It'll be against your lease. If you own the bike, like most of us do, then you can do what you bloody well like to it. There is no regulations for MOT as far as the catalytic converter is concerned. There is no regulation. Any regulations that were in place in the past are now null and void with Brexit. So, an exhaust only needs to be able to get the fumes away from the driver or occupants or whatever, according to construction use. There is no, for purposes of MOT, there is no emissions test. So it's a moot point. So you can put whatever exhaust and intake system you want on any bike you want if you own it. And if they ever change regulations, as is always the case with construction use regulations, and I've got about 100 years of history here to back me up, the regulations are never retrospective. So if you, as I've said before, if you own a vehicle and you modify it, you can do so. This is in the UK only, I stress the word, because your rules vary in different countries, but in the UK, if you want to do these modifications, you can. There's nothing to stop you doing it. And I wouldn't be stopped anyway, because I'm a biker of some 4 decades, nearly 5 decades now. And I've always titivated and customised and tuned my bikes how I see fit, because that's what I got into it for. I've always been of a mechanical turn of mind. I'm an engineer. I mean, I've also been dispatch rider, but that's another story. But I've always had this thing about modifying and customising, and it's something I've always done. It's not anything new, but of course to some of you younger people, it is a fairly new thing, but you know, it's rewarding and it's fun. Even if you can't do the work yourself, just the fun in planning the modifications and then getting somebody who can do it, you know, that's worth doing as well. It's still customisation, it's still valid. Whether you do the work yourself or you have a knowledgeable friend who does it, or even if you take it to a bike dealer or motorcycle workshop to get it done. The only rule of thumb is when you do modifications, just make sure that they're safe. Make sure that it's within the parameters of how the bike is designed and things like that, and you won't go far wrong. Now, as far as the Stage 2 tune is concerned, those are your 3 components. They make the bike run cooler and more efficiently, and you'll get the most out of the standard setup. Now, all of those things I mentioned are reversible if for some reason you decide to sell the bike or get a new one of the same platform. You can take all them parts off and put on the next one, or you can let the bike go modified, and just, if you've still got the original parts, give them to the next owner, and then they can decide what they want to do. But again, from that point of view, it's up to you. So anything I've said so far is reversible and is a bolt-on solution. No problems. You haven't got to open the engine up for those things or anything like that. Now, the next thing I've done is Stage 3. Stage 3 is worth quite a bit more horsepower. We've already got 20 at the crank. The Kent cam is worth somewhere in the region of 7 or 8 horsepower at the crank. There is, on my community part of my YouTube, if you look, I've put a photograph of a printout of a dyno test that was done on this configuration, the Stage 3 configuration, which is the DNA filter kit, the free flow exhaust, and the FuelX, plus the Kent cam. You will get 23 horsepower at the wheel, or 27-ish, 28 at the crank, but 23 plus, getting on for 24 horsepower at the rear wheel. But what this does, it doesn't affect the speed limiter in the ECU. That means your insurance company, if they're sensible, won't mind you doing it. I already checked my insurance company and they're quite happy with the modifications I've done, because I haven't altered the top speed of the bike. What I have altered is the torque available. Now, if you saw Tiger Ness's video recently, he overtook 2 vehicles going uphill with this cam, and he didn't even have the DNA filter or the free flow exhaust. He was running on an open intake plate, and decap pipe on the standard exhaust. Now you got 20.5 horsepower out of that, done on Hitchcock's dyno. All these figures are relative. Your mileage may vary according to your elevation of where you live, the temperature, and all sorts of things. Sometimes it's more of an art than a science in some respects. But anyway, there's your baseline. 23 horsepower, real horsepower at the rear wheel. And the one thing I found out when I took out the test riders, yes indeed, the bike will ride along like it does ordinarily straight out of the crate. It goes along nicely. With the modifications done up to stage 2, the throttle response is nicer, the engine runs cooler. Yeah, the oil gets an easier time, and so does the engine components. So if you're pottering around at lower speeds, you're not going to be overheating the engine, which is what the standard setup does, unfortunately. But here's the real thing. Overtaking. There are certain times when you want to overtake. For whatever reason, whether it's, in my case, I like to get past vans or lorries. If I know I'm coming into an area that's going to be a speed restriction, like a 50 mile an hour, I might want to get ahead of those large vehicles so that I can actually see the road further down. There is actually a piece of road where I do exactly that on a regular basis. And what I found, of course, same thing that Tiger Nest did, when pulled out, indicated pulled out, and cracked the throttle open, and she wound up the rev range really fast, way fast, probably twice as fast as stock. And it got past, did a safe overtake, no fuss, no muss. And that is what I was intending to do with the stage 3 tune, to give Mustang sign just that little bit more oomph for overtaking manoeuvres, and also get her up the rev range a bit faster. So, 0 to 60 time. Tiger Nest actually on his one measured at 20.5 horsepower. He measured his best number was 11 point something seconds, 0 to 60, and that's down from 16 odd seconds, 0 to 60. My setup will probably, and I haven't been able to test this yet, but will probably get it down to about 10 seconds. Well, if you're going from 16 seconds to 10 or 11 seconds, 0 to 60, that is one hell of an achievement, bearing in mind what you're putting in money-wise and whatnot. To get that sort of size of improvement on, say, a bigger bike, you're going to be spending thousands. You're only spending hundreds in the case of the J platform, and it makes it it makes a nice motorbike great. It actually makes the machine, as I say, run more what I think the designers intended, because when they designed this bike, it didn't have a restriction on the rev limit. It didn't have rev limiters, it didn't have speed limiter, it did not have catalytic converters, it didn't have all the restrictions that were built in at the factory. The restrictions were built in at the behest of the policy makers in India. Now, why Royal Enfield didn't choose to do an export model with a different ECU, and I have no idea, because it's only a bit of programming. So, well, that'll always be a mystery. It will be interesting to see if Royal Enfield subsequently start tinkering with the ECU a bit and maybe loosening the parameters off a bit, because these things, once you've done what I've done, the machine is a marvellous thing. I mean, it's a marvellous thing straight out of the crate. And I can still bimble along through the villages. You'll see when I start doing my ride-out videos again, when the weather's improved, they'll bimble along quite nicely, same as they always have. But where you'll notice the difference is when we hit the angling TT circuit, my test circuit that I do, you'll find that my overtaking is visibly faster. I mean, visibly so. If you go back to my back catalogue of the Anglin TT I did on the Meteor in stage 2 tune, and then when I'm going to do it again on the Classic with the stage 3 tune, you will see a hell of a difference. So anyway, as far as this project is concerned, it's mission accomplished. The machine works beautifully, it works efficiently. I'm not going to start addressing things like losing a couple of miles per gallon because of the tuning, because, you know, at this level it's not really a consideration. I mean, the fact of it is the bike will now perform the way I expected it to. It now performs very much like Poppy the 500 Bullet used to. Now when you open the throttle to overtake, you get that kick in the pants that you'd get with the 500 Bullet. But then, having said that, you've now elevated the J platform engine up to the same sort of power level as the UCE 500 engine. You've got to remember there's a big difference in technology. The UCE engine was still based on the old Indian Bullet terminals, terminals, my words again. Yeah, so it was a push rod engine, and you can only do so much with those. But this J platform engine is a marvellous, modern, overhead cam engine. And with the Kent cam in it, I can guarantee you it's a whole bundle of fun more on top of what it already was. So you make a fun bike funner. So, you know, from that point of view, it's worth doing. And it's been fun. So, if only for that reason it's worth doing. But, of course, the other side effect of... and I'll be interested to see how Goose Rider Scotland gets on in the future when he fits the cam to his. The fun bit is going to be seeing how she climbs hills. Because I suspect... with the, and I think Tiger Ness will back me up on this, is when you start opening it up, going uphill, you're not going to have to cog down so much. You're going to be able to keep climbing that hill in third gear without having to drop. If it's a steep gradient, who knows, you might even be able to start climbing hills in fifth. I mean, another thing that people misunderstand, fifth gear is an overdrive. It's not. You're supposed to use it once you've been up through fourth gear. You're supposed to use fourth gear to get up to 70 and then kick in fifth. Well, of course, it'll do that now quite easily. It was a bit tricky on the stock engine, even with the stage 2 tune. It was still a little tricky. You had to tickle it up there to get it from in fourth up to, you know, up towards the top speed. But now you can wallop it up to 70 mile an hour on fourth gear and then kick in the fifth just to cruise. And the other little fallacy I would like to blow up, hopefully once and for all, but I doubt it, is these bikes will do motorways. I get really annoyed with reviewers who review the J platform bikes and say, oh, well, I wouldn't want to ride it on the motorway, or it's not really super. That's a complete load of dingoes kidneys. Honestly, it will, look, it's got the speed limit for 75 mile an hour indicated, right? It is over-engineered. This engine at 70 mile an hour is not using any of its potential, because the engines were designed, at the design stage and the prototype stage, they could reach 90 miles an hour. They're over-engineered. They're restricted to 75. You can still ride at 70 quite happily. The bike does not get upset. You might get slowed down by a headwind occasionally and whatnot, but that happens on any bike that's below maybe, 500cc or whatever. But we used to live with that. Years ago, we didn't have any bloody choice, because that was the nature of motorbikes. If the wind was behind you, great. If the wind was against you, well, that was just one of them things. So, please, reviewers, stop telling people that these bikes won't do motorways and neighbourhoods, because they blooming well will, all day. No problem at all. It just makes me annoyed, because you're not giving people the right opinion. Just because you prefer a rather larger machine to do motorway does not mean you can't do it on the Enfields. The 350 Enfields will do motorway speeds all blooming day. So, bear that in mind. The Meteor, I would say, is probably the better bike if you've got to do motorway. I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, who in their right mind wants to use a motorway if they can avoid it? The whole point of touring on a bike is you cruise along at a comfortable speed and enjoy the scenery. And I don't think you can really do that properly at 70 mile an hour anyway. So it don't matter how big your bike is or how much horsepower you got. If you're not doing it right, i.e. riding at a reasonable speed, enjoying the scenery, then you're wasting your time. Yes, I know there's people out there who like going fast. Well, fair enough. But, if you want to be going fast, then you get one of those faster bikes. But, you get to a certain age, and I'm certain it's to do with age. It's not just the fact that physically you aren't as strong as you used to be, but the thing is you want to take life a bit slower. You want to savour each day and each mile. And that's because when you get over 50, you start to be acutely aware that you've got more days behind you than you have ahead of you. And so those days become precious. Those miles become precious. You want to save them, and you don't need to be going 100 mile an hour. You want to be going half that speed because you want to take everything in. Now, as I say, you younger ones, I don't expect you to maybe understand what I'm saying because you haven't reached my age yet. Some of you have reached my age and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's funny how all them people that I know at my age do drive like I do, because for the same reason. They're savouring the time they have on the road. They're enjoying the motorcycling. And the thing is, this motorbike, these Royal Enfields, are the very essence of the biking that I enjoyed when I was younger. We didn't have sat-nav, we didn't have electronics, we didn't even have fuel injection. Them days you had to know how to fettle a carburettor. I mean, you're really lucky these days that fuel injection is so much easier to work with if you've got your head round it. But there's still things you can do old-fashioned. Air intakes and exhausts is a no-brainer if you know about it. Hot cams, same thing, that hasn't changed. We used to do that back in the old days as well. Different profile cams and air intakes and various. Some bikes, but going back to British bikes, didn't have any filter at all. They just had a open bell mouth. So, it wasn't an issue because they could get in all the air they wanted, and that was more to do with the size carburettor and the settings. So there's that. Anyway, I think at that point I've had my gabble, and you've had my view on things, and yeah. Anyway, so there, I did promise you a garage video, and there you go. You got a garage video. I've had a little look at the model aeroplanes, the Cold War jets that I have. So I'm hoping Bruce will like that, and one or two other people are into that sort of thing, because model making is my other hobby. These are all die-cast jets, by the way. I've collected them over a few years. Mistakes were made, and I over-collected, if you see what I mean. In fact, actually, once upon a time, I used to have an eBay shop, and I used to do die-casts and film collectibles and stuff, which is probably how I ended up with a lot of these. Anyway, as I always say,
Keep both hands on the handlebars, unless you're giving hand signals. Keep both wheels on the tarmac at all times, unless you're off-roading. And above all, and I do mean this, above all, be kind to people. You don't know what they're dealing with. So a kind word or a kind gesture goes a long way for a lot of people. And being kind is the best way to be in life. It doesn't show weakness, it shows strength. Anyway, I shall sign off now. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed this little look at the my garage. As you can see, when I keep saying I've stuck bits I've taken off the bike in the back of the garage, I have quite literally done that. Anyway, I shall catch you all later. Until the next time, bye-bye.